Hello, colleagues and Dr. Walker. I am Angela. I'm going to share a little bit about the Notice and Wonder strategy. Um, Basically, it would be about using student-led observations and inquiries as a formative assessment tool. So, shall we? So what is Notice and Wonder? Just a brief little intro. I was introduced to this in one of my graduate methods courses that I took last semester. Um, I wasn't familiar with it as a technique to be used in this, secondary or elementary level classroom, but within learning more about education, because I'm pretty far removed from it, other than my graduate studies here, it is a technique that is used. So I thought it was pretty interesting. So basically, it is student led sharing with minimal teacher input using the prompts. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Um, it's basically presenting some form of artifacts. I say that very loosely, or any kind of like text, pictures, diagrams, maps, any form of text. And I say that very loosely, and asking kids, what do you notice about this? And you basically record, or they can record everything that they notice. And then you ask, what do you wonder? What kind of questions do you have from it? It sounds very trivial and simple, but it's really just about giving kids the tools to learn, and then kind of getting out of the way and seeing what they come up with. And there's a lot of ways to gather data for formative assessment using this, which I'll talk about some more. Um, so you also want to provide plenty of time and opportunities for students to explore their thinking, any curiosities or thoughtful inquiries, and make connections between what they're noticing and what they question about it further. So that is a brief synopsis of what the technique is. So you can use this as like a whole class kind of activity. You can connect it to whatever content or grade level that you are at, really, and basically put up. I'm studying to be an English ELA teacher, so my brain goes to a million different ways that I could use it, but I did use it in my IEP lesson plan, which I'll talk about in a future slide. But basically, as a whole class, if you wanted to do it as a discussion, you could just have kids share out, raise their hand for whatever you have up displayed for them to observe, and you can record with their name on the board, first going through the notices, and then at some point when the kids are done, because you want them to like dive deep and like, you know when they think that they noticed everything, like prompt them, like, anything else, is there anything else that's piquing your interest or that you're noticing about this? You want to record their observations. You could do it as a gallery walk if you have multiple artifacts or texts or whatever the case may be that you're demonstrate or that you're displaying for them, and they could use post-its to record it. You could have kids record it themselves on the whiteboard, so there's different ways to implement it in the classroom as a whole class. You can also use this strategy in a digital format, which is what I did for my lesson plan. And that could look something as simple as having a T-chart created where they can record what they notice and what they wonder by giving them, a certain amount of spots that they have to fill out information regarding whatever the content is that you're displaying for them. And have that in a hyperdoc or in some kind of online learning management system, and they could just enter in their information right into the T-chart that you have created for them. Um, After you initiate the process of notice and wondering, once they get pretty familiar with that format and they're ready to kind of like deepen their thinking a little bit more, and you want to stretch them out as learners, I added this other component that is also well known. I'm not really reinventing the wheel, I'm just sharing it. But adding another layer would be asking them what they think. So when you add that, it kind of makes the students think about the why of what they're noticing or what observations they're making before they move on to the wonder step. So um, let me just scoop myself over, sorry. This is the depth of knowledge snapshot. I'm sure we've all learned quite a bit about depth of knowledge and Bloom's taxonomy. Excuse me. So with these assessment tasks, I just kind of broke down my take on what we're asking kids to do when we're asking them to notice, wonder, and think. So with the notice step, they are making observations. So this is kind of level 1, level 2, depth of knowledge, where they're identifying certain things that they can pick up, and they're evaluating what they see, and they're recording their observations. Um, I'm going to skip down to think, but when you ask them to think, then they're drawing conclusions, and they're kind of making connections, and trying to um, um, work with the information of what they're noticing and synthesizing that and doing something with it. So that is more level 3, level 4 thinking. And then with the wonder step is when they're asking questions, and they're collecting data, and they have inquiries about, I wonder what happens if this is this, or I wonder why this is this. It'll make more sense when I show you my concrete example. I'm sorry, it's kind of vague. But this is just tapping into those different depths of knowledge, which is, I think, is useful to keep in mind for any formative assessment, to understand like what exactly the tasks are that we are assessing, you know? So for my example, again, I'm an aspiring English teacher, and I had created a lesson plan based off of, it was a pre-reading digital learning station lesson plan. And one of the overarching unit plan that I had in mind was that texts of any kind, whether it be poetry, music, art, graphic memoir, which was actually the reading unit, what it was, um, stories can be told in any kind of artifact or text, shall we say. So keeping that in mind, the pre-reading digital learning stations had just that. It had samples of a spoken poem, which is the video that is here. It had a collection, like an art gallery collection of art, and everything tied in thematically to the graphic memoir that we were reading in my unit plan. So anyway, just to give a more concrete example of how I used it, the standard that I was going off of for this specific lesson plan, really watered down here, is basically for 11th grade, they had to make inferences and cite really strong evidence that supported their analysis. So how I worked that with the notice, wonder, and think was that I had the students watch this video, and then the prompts, the questions that I had asked them in a hyperdoc was, what do you notice about the delivery of the poet? What are some factors that help create a strong impact on spoken word poetry? And then I left the spot in a chart that they had to fill out. And then there was a question, what do you think about why she made these choices in her poem? Think about tone, inflection, presentation, visuals. So I'm trying to ask leading questions to help make them make connections of what they think about what they noticed. And then from there, the last prompt was, what do you wonder about the delivery? What are you curious about after listening to her spoken word poem? Do you wonder how this connects to our unit? So it's just a way for them to be introduced to this new unit plan that I had created. And this was how I used it as an introductory assessment to gather information of what the starting place is for all of my students and where they are. So how can notice, wonder, and think help inform future instruction? So what's the point of this exactly, right? Other than filling class time, it gives you really valuable data that I believe. So first of all, like I referenced in the previous slide, it gives you an area to identify like the different levels of background knowledge that your students have. So whether you use this as an introductory instructional tool, or you use it mid unit, you can get information based on what the students are noticing, whether it's just like real surface level information, maybe they need some more of that conceptual knowledge to really understand what's happening in the unit, or what you will be presenting to them in the future. It will also identify gaps in understanding. So if students seem to be kind of not off base, but maybe a little bit veering this way, but you want the unit to go this way, to get them pulled back in. It'll help you identify like gaps of maybe there's some misunderstandings here, or maybe I have to clarify this information because they're unsure. And I could tell based on what they're noticing or the connections that they're making that something isn't connecting. It also will help you identify differentiation and flexible grouping needs. So if you are finding that if you do a whole class type share and you're recording the names or, of the comments that the students are making, and at the end of the class, you're able to like kind of look back and maybe group students like, oh, these students seem to have a really firm grasp or maybe a higher level of understanding. So they're going to be tiered in this for my, in certain instructional needs. And these students seem like they need a little bit more background knowledge, or maybe with the skill level is not there. So I'm going to need to tier them here with some of the instructional materials. So it's going to give you the ability to see maybe some like flexible grouping needs or how you can differentiate your future instruction. And then another thing that I thought that it could do is that will determine common areas of interest for students. So this can be helpful because it can help you identify different access points, so to speak, with content. So if you find that with your wonders, some like a lot of students are really sharing like the same wonders about something, then even if that wasn't planned in your future lesson plans, you can bring that in because you're going to have more student buy-in because they're really interested in learning about this, and more engagement, higher levels of participation. And it just gives, it adds to the relevancy of connecting the material to the student. So just something that I thought of that could be really helpful. um, So accommodations, in particular to my 11th grade student in the IEP, but really this could be for any student. I think these are appropriate accommodations for all students, especially if you've never um, done this strategy in the class. So one would be to provide sentence stems. So instead of just I notice, I wonder, give them those leading questions or start them off with what do you notice? If there's two things you could say, what do you notice about um, image A that is similar to image B, um, or is image B connected to, however you want to word it, or whatever the content that you're presenting. I don't want to just narrow it in on ELA because I think it could work for anything. But to provide those sentence stems or leading questions to help activate their thinking and get into that mind frame of like really inquiry based and student led. So you're still kind of getting out of the way, but you're just like really leading them a little bit to where they should be and asking the questions. Another accommodation would be to provide plenty of response time. So don't rush students. You want to make this as low stress and like low stake. I repeated low stress there, sorry, in my text. But make it really low stakes because that'll increase the participation. There's no wrong answer when it comes to noticing something. So that should alleviate a lot of the pressure of like the kids who may be a little bit nervous to raise their hand and share something because they're scared of getting it wrong. Keep it very low stress and more of an informal kind of share. You can also model and practice, which is really important because students may not off the bat have the skills to really understand the deeper level of thinking. So when you're first noticing something about anything new presented to you, of course, you might notice the things that are like really on the surface, but to model that think aloud thought process for something, if you did an example one for them and went through like, I noticed this, and then gradually deepen your thinking so they can see how you're going deeper than just the surface level. I think that's really beneficial for students. Um, And then lastly, using an actual graphic organizer. So even if it is a class share, provide them with a T-chart or some kind of graphic organizer so they can organize their thoughts and any new connections that are made. Because when you do this as only the notices first, and then you do the wonders, or you do the think and then the wonders, you'll find that I think there's going to be a lot of connections made once they see everything written out for the notices. So I think having something to help them organize their thinking and have a visual representation that they could actually like connect things to could be really helpful. So some of the benefits of Notice and Wonder, it's very teacher and student friendly. It is low prep, low stress, low stake. It's really easy to implement. And it's something that you can use as an instructional strategy, like I mentioned before, where it could be something that you introduce to introduce a unit, I'm sorry, something you use to introduce a unit, no matter what the content is. I picture it as like a gallery walk with different artifacts and content that the kids can go to each station and kind of know what they notice and wonder. Or you can use it as a formative assessment tool. It could be used as a review, I think, because having those wonders will really give you a place to understand like if the students are ready for a more summative assessment. It'll give you a plan for your future instruction to know where the needs are, of where the confusion is, where they have strengths and understanding. So that's really helpful. I mentioned it could be used across all content areas and all grade levels. Like I mentioned, I learned about this in my graduate class last semester, and it's something that can be used easily in kindergarten, depending on what the content is and how you present it to the students. It is low stake and low stress. There's no wrong answers. It's you just have to really ensure the students that there's no wrong thinking when it comes to asking questions or making observations. It's every student will be able to have something valuable to add to that. So I think that that can be really reassuring um, and helpful for their self-esteem. And also, it's a way to meet the students where they are in their understanding currently. And it gives you a starting point, a fair starting point too, because you are, as a teacher, I think you are you're clear on what you need the students to learn, but you're not thinking like a student. So this gives you a kind of a front row seat to like what they're thinking and where their thought process is and what they're noticing off the bat and where the questions are. So I hope that, I think that is my last slide. I hope that this is a tool that you can use no matter what your content area is or your grade level. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much.